Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Oleg Melnyk, and I'm working as a researcher for the French National Center for Scientific Research. And I'm very proud to have created two startup companies with my research work. The first company, develops and sells diagnostic tools that are useful for medical applications. For example, some tools are used to predict the organ compatibility for transplantation. Some of the tests are used to detect pathogen infections. Some of you in this room, perhaps, have been tested for COVID using the systems developed by the company. The second company that has been created, its activity is radically different from the first one. The activity of the second company is to develop methods to produce molecules that are of interest to design future drug molecules. As a researcher, you might think that what I'm doing is extremely complicated and can be repeated or reproduced only by people that have very special skills. Actually, I think that my mission as a chemist is exact opposite. I'm constantly searching for simplicity just because I want to design practical solutions that can be used by as many people as possible. My work is a constant search for practicability. So what is practicability? Practicability is the quality of being usable. Something practical is simple or easy to use. But by saying that, you just shift the problem to know what you include, what you put in the terms simply or easy to use. In fact, practicability is a very general term that can integrate many aspects, many notions, depending on the context, such as the cost, of course, of what we are producing, the time needed to produce a product, or the waste, the quantity of waste that you can generate, or the storage conditions, and so on. If you want to use practicability in a feedback loop to optimize, to evolve the products that you want to make, you will have to find your own definition of practicability. And by doing that, you will be able to evolve, optimize the products that you want to make according to your needs. As a researcher working in chemistry, my definition of practicability includes the following. A product will be considered practical if it results in a significant time gain while using extremely cheap, abundant, non-toxic chemicals or materials. And in addition to this, I want to use affordable equipment or preferably or better equipment that we already have in the lab. I just want to do the same or even better, much more, but with less resources, with less time. And doing that is highly challenging, believe me. In fact, practicability, the search for practicability, doesn't take us backwards, but instead asks for a lot of innovation. And this is really what motivates me every day. To better understand this, just imagine you are asked to prepare a meal for your family and your best friends. And by reading through the list of ingredients, you realize that some items are missing. These missing items are also very expensive and hard to find. You realize also that to make the recipe, you need a special equipment that is expensive and that you don't have either. Not want to shy away from a challenge, you decide to look around your kitchen, your fridge, and you decide to make the same, but with less. Another problem is that you realize that your guests arrive in a few hours, and the recipe is very long. And the recipe is very long because you need to mix several ingredients in a stepwise manner, and you have to wait in between. You have long pauses between each operation, and this takes a lot of time. So to solve the problem, you decide to mix several ingredients at the same time, and by doing that, you skip long pauses and you save a lot of time. At the end, you saved a lot of money, you prepared the meal on time, your guests were happy, and now it is your special recipe. So, by searching for practicability, I want to do the same or even more with less. And this will give you a competitive advantage, for sure. And this is good for the business. I had the opportunity to visit a university in a developing country a long time ago. And the professor was teaching chemistry in the laboratory by using a chemical reaction, working in tap water, and using extremely cheap reagents. When I was in the laboratory, one of the professors said, "Look, using this small bottle of chemical, I can work for the next 10 years. These people were using a chemical reaction that has been discovered a few years before I could make this visit, and that is now intensively used in all the world, in academic labs, of course, but also in industry for being broad scope, cheap, fast, and highly efficient." So the important question now, are there so many opportunities to design more practical products or processes? After all, are there so many products or processes that are unpractical? And to discuss this point, I would like to share with you the reading of a wonderful essay written by Stephen Jay Gould and published in this book entitled Belly for Brontosaurus. In this book, the author discusses the history of the QWERTY keyboard. The QWERTY keyboard is very similar to the AZERTY one that you use every day when you are in front of your computer. This keyboard is overused, as you can see. Some keys are overused. And what is very strange to see is that these keys are on the first row here, not at the center, where you expect them to be, because the center of the keyboard is the most accessible to your fingers. Instead, in the center of the keyboard, you can find the less frequent letters. And the most frequent ones, A, E, or O, for example, are on the first row in the least accessible positions. How this can be possible? In fact, the author discusses that the QWERTY or AZERTY keyboards have been invented in the 19th century, about 160 years ago. At the time, people were starting using mechanical typewriters. And because of the problems with mechanical typewriters, it was important to slow down the typing of the letters to avoid the tangling of the keys, as you can see here on this picture. The QWERTY or AZERTY keyboard is totally unpractical, but you are all in this room happy to use it every day. We have plenty of such stories in process chemistry, believe me. There is clearly no shortage of opportunities for inventing, for developing more practical processes or products. But something is clear. If we don't stop living, consuming, producing as we do today, we will be faced with a significant shortage of some of our resources, some of which are used for process chemistry. The story of the QWERTY keyboard tells us three important things. The first one is that if you look around, you will find plenty of opportunities to create new products that are more practical. The second one is that it's important to anticipate future needs, future regulations, price increases, because practically can change a lot with time. The third lesson from this story is that although you propose, you suggest a more practical product or process, you will have to work extremely hard to see it spreading. Very interesting. Now, what I show you is a universe keyboard, the periodic table of the elements. You can see that some of the elements are colored in red. These elements are considered as critical raw materials by the European Union, meaning that in the future, in the near future, we will have problems with these elements with significant price increases and potential supply problems. For example, palladium or platinum here in the center of this keyboard are extremely expensive, and the price is predicted to rise a lot in the next years. These noble metals are extremely useful in process chemistry, but we know that they are extremely difficult to extract from the earth. The environmental footprint for extracting these elements is extremely high. And we know that the problem will become worse in the future because of the global warming, because the transition to green energies will create significant tensions on some of these elements which are used in process chemistry. So, should I use these elements as potential additives in my work, in my recipe? When I want to do something, the answer is clearly not. I don't want to. Instead, I will try to replace these elements by some others that are much more abundant, non-toxic, and easy to find, such as iron here. This is exactly what we do today in the lab. We are using iron to effect very useful chemical transformations on amino acids, which are extremely important for accessing some type of drugs. And some of the processes we have developed are currently tested in the industry for the capacity to produce some drugs. Now I would like to give you a concrete example of what we are doing in the lab, and I think which is a good illustration of the title of my talk, which is doing more, and in this case much more, but with less. This story started in about 2000, and at that time we were interested in inventing new methods to detect antibodies in blood samples. Detecting antibodies in blood samples is extremely important in medicine because this allows to detect, for example, pathogen infections. Classical tests are performed by taking some blood from the patient, and which is analyzed in such kind of plates which are made of plastic. This is very common in biological labs. The important thing to remember with such a system is that one vial of this 96 well plate gives you one information, only one information. So a plate can analyze 96 blood samples, but you will have only one data per each well, okay? The problem is that if you want to use such a test for detecting COVID, for example, you will have useful information if you have antibodies against COVID or not, but you will not know if these antibodies have been generated by a vaccine, or if you have been infected, and if you have been infected, if the antibodies were generated by the Delta, the Omicron, or another variant that is circulating. To have this information, you will need to run as many assays as the number of data you want to collect, okay? So faced with this limitation, we decided to develop a new tool that enables to collect hundreds of data from a single assay. And at the time, we were working on microscope glass slides that you probably know, because glass is super cheap, and because the surface chemistry of glass is well known, and it is important to master the chemistry of the surface when you want to make a diagnostic test, because this is extremely important for the sensitivity and for the reproducibility of the assay. But we decided to change our checklist for practicability at the time, and we decided to include some safety aspects. And we realized that by doing that, glass was no longer acceptable for developing a diagnostic test, just because glass can break, hurt the manipulator, and this can be extremely dangerous if the system is used to analyze samples that are potentially infectious. So we decided to use plastic plates as the one that you can see here, because there is a great advantage of doing that. All the labs have already the equipment to manipulate and analyze these plates. But the problem is that we had to redesign everything because the chemistry of plastic is radically different from that of glass. But at the end, the work was very rewarding because this enabled the creation of the first startup company in 2008. So what we are doing with these systems, what we do, we print dots in the bottom of the vials. We can print hundreds of these dots in the plate. So for example, if you have 100 dots in a vial, a 96 well plate will give you not 96 data, but 9,060 data in a single operation, okay? So you make one assay, you see immediately your COVID status with such a system. I were to finish by saying that take the time to look around, to discuss with others. I'm sure you will find plenty of opportunities to develop more practical products, more practical processes that have a reduced impact footprint on the environment. And I think that this is really what matters today. Thank you.